Horse racing has always played a major part in Melbourne's sporting scene. From the suburban racecourses in Caulfield, Springvale and Moonee Valley to the massive racecourse at Flemington, few in Melbourne have not at least heard of its existence. But like all sports, horse racing can attract massive crowds. Because of this, and the prevalence of the sport during the railway's golden era, many courses have at least some railway access. Williamstown Racecourse was no exception to this, and even though it has since closed, the legacy of the line still remains. Williamstown Racecourse was opened in 1859. Despite being named after the suburb of Williamstown, the grounds on which the course was actually laid are now located within the suburb of Altona. Race meetings were held yearly on Boxing Day. For the first year, the only access was by horse. However, by 1860, an improvised station had been opened nearby the Geelong line. I can find very little about this station, other than it was first used on December 26, 1860, and fell out of use upon the opening of the new station in 1885. It was only stopped out by trains on the race day, and probably just consisted of a signpost. This station was located on the main line, roughly where the Altona Loop Junction is located today. The problem with this station was that it was just over a kilometre away from the racecourse, and the land of the time meant that it wasn't a fun walk. Nothing exists, at least that I can find, about the operation of this station during its lifetime. Another little bit of history, which I have found but have almost no information on, is the actual location of the original racecourse. It is reported that the racecourse was located close to Williamstown for the first several years, until it was moved to a location nearer to Colroy Creek in 1868. The location of the original course mustn't have been far from the later one, however, as the station that served them didn't change location. The period from 1868 to 1885 was pretty bland in terms of upgrades to accessing the station. In 1873, the bridge across Colroy Creek was upgraded from timber to iron construction, and in 1876, the racecourse was resurfaced and majorly renovated. Construction of a dedicated line commenced in either late 1884 or early 1885. The line was very short, only branching about 800 metres till stopping just short of Colroy Creek Road. The line itself was rather bland, with just a single track and no bridges, cuttings, crossings or overpasses along its length. The first train ran along this new line in testing on April 6, 1885, and the line first saw passengers on the 7th. Services were not regularly scheduled, but only ran on race days. 2 years later, in 1887, the line was extended a further 400 metres across Colroy Creek Road and just before the creek itself. This new location, just before the creek, allowed for better access to the ground and lowered the distance patrons had to walk. In the early days, all trains ran to and from Spencer Street Station. In 1888, the private Altona and Laverton Bay Freehold and Investment Company laid a private railway from Williamstown Racecourse to Altona Beach. This line was intended to drive up property value, and the first trains ran on November 9th. This wouldn't last long, however, as very little land was being purchased and the line was incredibly unprofitable. The final train ran on August 4, 1890, after only 21 months. From this point on, the line became abandoned. In 1906, Victorian Railways entered a deal with the then owners of the line, the Altona Beach and Estates Limited, to start using some of the line to stable race trains. In 1911, the junction of the two lines gained a signal box with a 30-lever frame and 14 signals. In this configuration, the Williamstown Beach line was the main line, whilst Altona, which was still abandoned, was the branch. On March 6, 1916, the use of the Altona line to stable trains was banned in favour of storing them at the sidings located north of Colroy Creek Road. This was followed in September, with the Altona line being reopened for military purposes. Finally, on the 1st of December 1917, the local passenger service resumed to Altona Beach. The station itself was rather large. It had 2 platforms, both were dead-end stops. Both of these platforms had a runaround loop to their sides. The runaround loop of the west platform was also where the Altona line branched off. On the north side of the station, 2 sidings are located. These were used to store trains during race days for use on the afternoon. In 1912, a 3rd siding was added, and by 1933, a 4th and 5th had been added. In 1920, both the Williamstown Racecourse and the Altona Beach lines were electrified for use by electric suburban trains. Around this time, the racecourse received major new upgrades, including the construction of a new grandstand. The line would continue to see race traffic for a further 20 years until its sudden end. The last race meeting took place on February 10, 1940. 5 months earlier, the invasion of Poland had dragged Britain and the Commonwealth into the Second World War. Now, with recreational sports considered non-essential to the war effort, many racing clubs were kicked out of their grounds to make way for training camps and temporary housing. Williamstown Racecourse was no exception, and it was soon taken over by the Army for this purpose. The intention was always to return the grounds to the club after the war, but as it would turn out, this was not to be. As the war came to an end in 1945, the grounds were converted to a new purpose: housing returned veterans without anywhere to go. In 1947, with the return to the club imminent, a fire broke out in the racecourse grandstands, quickly spreading through the crowds and destroying almost all of the permanent structures. With the grounds no longer usable for racing, the club abandoned them and sold them to the state. Despite not occupying the lands, they still owned it. During the war, it is likely that trains serviced the line for the military camp located there. However, once the racecourse had burnt down and the army left the grounds, it fell into disrepair and the station lay abandoned. Finally, in May 1950, the overhead wiring was removed from the station at its sidings. This was followed in 1951 by the removal of the signals, and finally in 1952 with the disassembly and removal of the station platform and tracks. The former grounds of the racecourse were eventually converted into parkland in the form of the Altona Coastal Park. Today, few know about the former Williamstown Racecourse or its train station. Trains still run along most of the line as it is part of the Altona Loop, but nothing remains on the grounds where the station actually stood.